So now let us go to our main subject for the retreat. We will be discussing, as you know, the essence of the Gita according to Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda did not have a long life, unfortunately, so he could not write a detailed commentary on any of the scriptures. Gita is a scripture on which, great saints and philosophers of India have written very detailed commentaries. It is probably the most commented upon scripture in India, where there is no lack of commentators and translations and elucidations and all. So Swami Vivekananda, unfortunately, as we all know, he passed away even when he was not even 40. So, and he had such a lot to do, he did not have the time. But he has given some discourses on the Gita while he was in the West. Unfortunately, those could not be taken out in full hand because I think the persons, they did not know shorthand most probably. But we still have a great portion of that. But what we will concentrate on these talks is, Swami Vivekananda has said that one verse of the Gita, one verse among the 700 verses, that contains the essence of the Gita. So, before going to that verse and trying to understand that verse, a lot of background is needed. And we can discuss also why Swamiji said that that is the one verse which is the essence of the Gita. So, let us start this discussion which will lead us to that verse which Swamiji has pointed out, that reading that one verse we can get the fruits of reading the whole of the Gita. That's why important that verse is. So first, let us start with the Pranam Mantra, that is the Stuti of Shri Krishna, because Shri Krishna is the one who taught the Gita to Arjuna, as we all know. So, this verse praises Krishna. It says that he was the son of Vasudeva and he was the slayer of demons like Kansa and Chanura, and he was the darling of Devaki and the world teacher. That's what the meaning of this verse is, which we will chant now. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So, as most of you know, the Bhagavad Gita occurs in the Bhishma Parva. There are many Parvas in the Mahabharata, Those are the sections, different sections of the Mahabharata. So, this occurs in the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, and Gita comprises of 18 chapters, we all know. So, in the Bhishma Parva also, it comprises of 18th to 25th chapters in the original Mahabharata, in the Bhishma Parva. And it is a discourse between Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield on the eve of the war, which forms the subject matter of the Mahabharata. This you all know. So, what is the central teaching of the Gita? The central teaching of the Gita is the attainment of freedom or liberation or mukti by performing one's own dharma or duty in life. Arjuna was turning away from his dharma because of his attachments. So Krishna had to teach Arjuna what was his duty under the given circumstances. So another verse which is in praise of the Gita says, Parthaya Pratibodhitam. Partha means our Arjuna. Arjuna's mother, Kunti, another of her name was Pritha. One more name of Kunti was Pritha. So son of Pritha is Partha, that is Arjuna. So this was taught to Parthaya Pradibodhitam. By whom? By Narayanena Swayam, by Narayana himself. Narayana means God. So this was taught to Arjuna by God himself. This is the importance of the Gita. So the Gita, as you know, is ranked among the greatest religious books of the world. And in India it occupies a position next only to the Upanishads. So the Gita is supposed to contain the essence of all the scriptures there are. That is the important. So there is a beautiful verse which describes this. It says, Sarvopanishado gavo dogdha gopalanandana partho vatsa sudhir bhokta dugdham gitamritam mahat. So beautiful simile is given that the essence of the Vedas are the Upanishads. Now, imagine the Upanishads to be like so many cows. The Upanishads are so many cows. And the milker of the cows is none other than God. He is taking the milk out of the cows, the essence of the cows. And Partha means our Arjuna, is being transmitted that knowledge. And Sudhir Bhokta means all those who are good persons, noble persons, they drink of this knowledge. And Dugdham, that milk, is Gita Amritam. That milk that is the nectar of the Gita. So if all the Upanishads are the cows, and the essence, that is the milk, is taken from all the Upanishads, that is the Gita. So you can most condensed form the essence of all the Upanishads. So for those who are in a modern age, very few people have the time to read through all those scriptures. So if one can really read the Gita and imbibe the spirit, it is more than enough. So all the Upanishads are cows, the milker is Sri Krishna, the calf is Arjuna, and the enjoyers are the wise ones, and the milk is the fine nectar that the Gita is. Sri Ramakrishna himself has said, you cannot contradict the sayings of the Gita, the teachings of the Gita. But in Bengali it is Gita Kotha Kadbar Jo Nahi. You cannot contradict it. It is absolutely the gospel truth. And in the words of the great Swami Vivekananda, he says about the Gita, than the Gita, no better commentary on the Vedas has been written or can be written. Just imagine the praise. So, than the Gita, no better commentary on the Vedas has been written or can be written. The essence of the Shrutis or of the Upanishads is hard to understand, seeing that there are so many commentators, each one trying to interpret in his own way. Then the Lord himself comes, he who is the inspirer of the Shrutis, to show us their meaning as the preacher of the Gita. And today, India wants nothing better, the world wants nothing better than that method of interruption. The teachings of Sri Krishna as taught by the Gita are the grandest the world has ever known. He who wrote that wonderful poem was one of those rare souls whose lives sent a wave of regeneration through the world. The human race will never again see such a brain as his who wrote the Gita. Just imagine. And it is coming from Swami Vivekananda. He said there cannot be a better commentary. Absolutely, that is not possible. The Bhagavad Gita is the best commentary we have on the Vedanta philosophy. So these are the words of Swamiji. So as we have discussed already, one verse of the Gita about which Swamiji has said that it contains the essence of the Gita, the message which the Gita wants to convey is embedded in that one verse. So according to Swami Vivekananda, if one reads this one verse, one gets all the merits of reading the entire Gita. For in this one verse lies embedded the whole message of the Gita. So this verse, of course, we will discuss later. First, we have to understand many things before what is going on, why they have assembled, why Arjuna had come to Kurukshetra, then what was his reaction, why did Shri Krishna has to remind Arjuna of his duty, all those we will discuss. So of course, when Swamiji says, we are very eager to know what that verse is. And of course, like the whole of the Gita, that verse has been told by Krishna, who is considered to be an incarnation of God, to his friend and disciple Arjuna. So we have to first understand the whole setting, the mental state of Arjuna, with what attitude he had come to Kurukshetra, how there was a transformation in Arjuna, and he underwent a sort of mental depression leading to a loss of discrimination. It was a kind of disease which he was undergoing, and the medicine for that disease was provided by none other than God himself, God incarnate on earth, Shri Krishna. So this was delivered, it is said to have been delivered on a battlefield. So there were two armies facing each other, we all know. One was the army of the Pandavas, the son of Pandu, and on the other side was the army of Kauravas. They were all the sons of Dhritarashtra, who was the king at that time. So this is the scene, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where the Pandavas and the Kauravas has assembled their armies for war. And what was the cause of this war? The cause, we all know what is the cause of all the wars. There is only one cause. Selfishness, love of power, cruelty, not considering other human beings as human beings. These people in thirst of power become so mad that they think that the whole world is just made for their own satisfaction. And so many hundreds and thousands of people suffer because of that. Maybe one demonic king or queen. So here the situation, what is the situation when the Gita is said? The armies are now ready for war. Actually, a lot of people had tried to avert this war. Had tried for peace. Negotiations had been going on for so long. There were so many appeals to Dhritarashtra, the king. If he had wanted, he could avert that war. And there were so many meetings, so many demands, refusals. It's a big story in itself. And as a last resort, even Shri Krishna himself had gone to the court of the Kauravas. And his discourse there is a masterly one, absolutely an example of statesmanship. It forms a separate matter for discussion, and I want to discuss it with everybody at a later date. It's absolutely masterful. But everything had failed. Because Duryodhana would not relent. He was evil incarnate, so to say. And Dhritarashtra, although he had the power, he was a slave to his son's wishes. He was so much attached. So that causes all the problems, So everything had been tried and failed. Now both the armies were standing and war would start any minute. This is the situation. And suddenly what happens? The main warrior, the best archer in India at that time, Arjuna, who had no peer, at this moment, he suddenly refuses to fight. This is the calamity. So just imagine. And it's not that there was some time or maybe fortnight or notice was given, nothing like that. When conches are blown and they are ready to go at each other's throats, this person, the mainstay of the Pandava army, is refusing to fight. This is happening. Why? Because there suddenly arose a conflict in Arjuna's mind. Should I fight? Is it really proper? So, why this conflict, we may think that many people, they first of all ask that Arjuna is supposed to be such a great hero and a devotee of Sri Krishna. So why do conflicts, how can conflicts arise in these people? They are such great people. This is not true. There is nothing wrong with conflicts. This we should understand first. In fact, each discriminating mind, when faced with various situations in life, is faced with conflicts. So, not only it is not bad, in one way it is also good, that we will see how. So it is such a great occasion, you see. Practically the whole of India was at war with each other. That was the situation. Each major king of India was either on the side of the Pandavas or on the side of the Kauravas. All the great warriors of the time were arranged as an army in front of Arjuna. And of course, he could also imagine the consequences of such a fight. Huge loss of life, terrible misery for those who would survive. So naturally, a conflict is bound to arise in any person's mind that, is a war necessary? Is it really proper for me to fight? So this we have to understand, that mere absence of conflict doesn't indicate greatness. Each discriminating mind will have some conflicts until he reaches the final stage. Final stage means he has reached the goal. He has realized God. Before that, there has to be some conflict. Because if lack of conflict was the sign of greatness, then Duryodhana would have become a saint, the evil Duryodhana. Because nowhere in Mahabharata we see any conflict in Duryodhana. He is performing the vilest of deeds. I mean, there was no sin which he is not committed. But we don't see any conflict in him, that whether I should do this or not. So there was conflict only when he was afraid, that he was willing to harm. He was very jealous of Bhim. Bhim was one of the Pandavas. So only conflict arose when he was scared of either Bhim or Arjuna, or scared of any loss, or scared of the empire going away from his hands. Only then we see. But there was no discrimination, that whether what I am doing is right or wrong. So if lack of conflict is the method of judgment, then Duryodhana would have become a saint. But that is not true. So we see nowhere Kauravas thinking that what they are going to do now, whether it is correct or not. So there is nothing wrong with conflicts in Arjuna. And he was very lucky to have the greatest guide in the world who could resolve his conflict. Now, in Sanskrit there is a word Sarathi. Sarathi means one who guides. In those days, war was fought in chariots. They had elephants and all, but the main warriors, most of them were in chariots, which was drawn by the horses. And naturally, each chariot has to have a charioteer. He was the one who guides. So, who was the guide of Arjuna? The best guide there could be God himself, because Krishna was the charioteer of Arjuna. So, who is Krishna? He is the guide of Arjuna, because he is guiding. If we take this to mean our life's journey, we are all going on a journey. So, we need a guide. So, when Arjuna was going on his journey, Krishna was his guide. Now, the interesting fact is, nowhere in the whole of Mahabharata, the name of Duryodhana Sarathi is mentioned. Duryodhana also has a chariot. There must have been a charioteer. But there is no mention of the charioteer anywhere. We are in complete ignorance of his charioteer. What does this mean? His charioteer was ignorance. Duryodhana was guided by ignorance, his own selfish motives, while Krishna is guided by God himself. So charioteer can stand for a guide on our life's journey. So while Duryodhana's Sarathi was ignorance, Arjuna's Sarathi was knowledge personified, God himself. So the conflict in Arjuna is a sign of discrimination. There is certainly nothing wrong with that. If we do whatever we want and keep on thinking whatever you like, that is not a sign of greatness. And it is interesting to note that only because of this conflict, he could take refuge in Krishna. He could take refuge in God and thus get enlightenment. So Arjuna's conflict in fact leads him to God. And see the difference in attitudes. Before the war begins in the first chapter, Duryodhana goes to Dronacharya, who was the commander of the Kauravas army. So he introduces Drona to both the armies as a formality, as a sign of respect. Of course, it is doubtful whether Duryodhana had any respect for anybody. So see how they address. Duryodhana addresses Dronacharya about the people who are fighting, and Arjuna also addresses Krishna. See the difference. Duryodhana says to Dronacharya that, "Oh teacher, see all these people who are standing, mad arthe tyakta jivita. All these people who are standing, they are ready to give their lives for my sake." This is the attitude of Duryodhana. That let them die, no problem. They are giving their lives for my sake so that I can have the power, I can have the empire, I can enjoy the kingdom. And what does Arjuna say? See the difference. When Arjuna asks Krishna whether he should fight or not, what does he say? He says, "Those for whom I am fighting, for whom I want the kingdom, they are in front of me. Why should I kill them?" So Arjuna at the onset also is not fighting for himself. He is fighting for his kinsmen. So he says, the persons whom I am fighting for are here on both the armies. If they die, then why should I fight at all? This is the great difference between who will attain knowledge and who won't. This is the attitude of Arjuna. So Arjuna did not want anything for himself. This we should realize. Because to understand the mental state of Arjuna, all this background is necessary. He was possessed by conflict at that time, but he had no selfish interest in the war. So these are the two sides, Kauravas and Pandavas, selfishness and ignorance on one side, and unselfishness, discrimination and knowledge on the other side. And the Gita itself says that where there is God, in the end it says, there victory will be there. Where there is dharma, there will be victory. So, whom does Arjuna represent? Arjuna represents a jiva. Jiva means an individual soul. Who is an individual soul? One who identifies himself with the body. Like people like us, ordinary people. So Arjuna represents people like us who are spiritual seekers. That is the thing. So we all face problems in life. Now by problems I don't mean what we should eat or drink or whether we should go shopping today or tomorrow, not those kinds of problems. Here problems means some fundamental questions about life. All spiritual seekers are faced with this problem. Problem of what? They start asking questions. What kind of questions? What is life? What is the aim of life? What is death? Does everything end with death? We all strive, whole life we are striving. Does everything finish at death? What is virtue? What is sin? What is our duty? What is our kartavya? What is akartavya? Akartavya means what we shouldn't do. So anyone who is a spiritual seeker, who is endowed with discrimination, will have these questions. And all these questions, our questions, have been echoed through Arjuna. So in answering Arjuna, God is answering our question. This is the thing. So we all know that human beings are not satisfied only with food, drink and a place to stay, etc. At the lowest level maybe, but when man rises higher, culture comes and spiritual needs arise. So then he starts searching for something beyond. And that state is represented by Arjuna. This we have to keep in mind if you want to understand the Gita. So another thing we should understand is that Arjuna was not an ordinary person, not by any means. Not only he was the greatest warrior on earth at that time, but he was also a great devotee and therefore specially dear to Shri Krishna. So even he was assailed with doubts. So if we are sometimes assailed with doubts, we don't have to worry at all because they can come to anybody. What happened when Swami Vivekananda went to Sri Ramakrishna for the first time? He was thinking, is this fellow sane? He looks like a monomaniac. So these things can come to anybody. So what was the doubt of Arjuna? First, he came with a desire to fight, that we will see later. But suddenly, his mindset changes. Suddenly, why did this happen? This we have to examine first. Why? What was the cause of this change, sudden change? So this we all know because we are all acquainted with the Bhagavad Gita to some extent. This we all know that Arjuna refused to fight. He said, I won't fight the Kauravas. Now, what may be the reason for Arjuna's refusal? We have to understand that. That is not. Please come. So what may be the reason for Arjuna's refusal to fight? There may be three reasons. First, Arjuna realized that he was to engage in a war. And a war means killing. Because one side will win and one side will lose, they will fight each other, there has to be killing, there has to be violence. So he said that killing is a sin. And I won't engage in any sin. I will have to kill so many people, I may go to hell. This is one fear. But when we see this, we have to remember that Arjuna had been in many fights before. In the Mahabharata, if you read, he had fought so many wars. So why did this fear of killing come in this war only? Before he did not say, I will not fight. Why in this war only? We will examine that. So why did this fear come? This came when he saw his relatives standing there. All the Kauravas, etc., were his brothers, half brothers, because Dhritarashtra and Pandu were half brothers. So naturally, their sons became brothers also. So all those who saw standing before him were his relatives, and he thought that these people are mine. While in other words, this was not the case. He didn't even know who was standing before him. So he saw that these are mine, my own flesh and blood. Thirdly, he had some doubts also maybe that whether he could really win, because the army of the Kauravas was much bigger than that of the Pandavas. So in Sanskrit it is measured in Akshohini. Akshohini means one Akshohini army consisted of 218,000 warriors. Yeah. So it is said that Kauravas had 11 such Akshohinis, 218,000 into 11, while Pandava had only 7 of them. So it was a ratio of 7 to 11. So Arjuna was maybe thinking that we are fighting against such odds. Can we really win? Can I really win? So these may be the causes. That Arjuna thought fighting means killing. I will go to hell if I kill so many people. Secondly, these are all my own flesh and blood. And thirdly, can we really win? Can the Pandavas really win? So these three feelings, how they crept up in Arjuna's mind, we will see. And he was so much depressed that he said to Krishna that I would rather go to a jungle and beg for my food. I don't want this kingdom and all that. Rather than kill so many people, I will be a mendicant. But I will not fight. But Krishna was, Krishna was God, so God can see the right through us, He can see what is going on inside the mind. So, of course, we know that he didn't listen to Arjuna. So, another thing, when examining Arjuna's state, another thing we have to remember is that Arjuna wasn't a hypocrite. This we have to remember. He was an absolutely sincere person. But he was assailed by doubts, and that can happen to anybody. You see, hypocrisy is when a person hides his real feelings. I mean, his real feelings are different, but he shows something else. But here, Arjuna is genuinely concerned and genuinely confused. He is genuinely concerned about the people who are standing before him, and he is genuinely confused about what his duty is actually. So he is very, very sincere. That is why he could take refuge in God. God, refuge in Krishna. So, God cannot be fooled by either of those things. God cannot be fooled by hypocrisy. He will see right through us. And if we are in a confused state and we are thinking that our duty lies somewhere else and we give various arguments as Arjuna gave, God cannot be fooled by those arguments either. So he will tell us what our real duty is, and in every age such people are there. Even we will be surprised to know that even persons who came to Sri Ramakrishna, some of them, they tried to show that they were something other than what they were really. Like in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, there is one incident. Most of you must have read it. Once devotees came to Sri Ramakrishna and they saw that a big tiger skin was hanging in his room. So they asked, "Sir, what is the tiger skin in your room? What is the matter?" So Master said, Sri Ramakrishna said in reply, that people are asking who does this skin belong to. So he said, Mahim Chakravarti left it there. One devotee, Mahima Charan Chakravarti, I think his full name was. He left it here in my room. Do you know why? So people will see it and ask me to whom it belongs. So when I mention his name, they will think that Mahima Chakravarti must be a big spiritual aspirant. He sits on such a big skin, and so in every age it is there. But Sri Ramakrishna was God, and any person can know such things. So Sri Ramakrishna knew. So this tells us that you cannot fool your own self and you cannot fool God also. So when Arjuna said, "Oh, I don't want kingdom, I don't want these wars and all, I don't want anything for myself, I am going to the forest and I will beg my food." So that is supposed to be a sign of what? That is supposed to be a sign of vairagya, renunciation. So he thought that Krishna would praise me. But Krishna was not the one to be fooled. He knew what was the reason behind this so-called sudden renunciation. So although Arjuna was a very sincere person, but he was being cheated by his own mind. So our problem is when our own mind starts cheating us, then we have no way to know the truth except through a teacher. Because how do we get at the truth? How do we come to a decision what to do and what not to do? Through our own mind only. So when our mind itself has turned against us, then there is no hope of getting at the truth except through a teacher whom we have faith in. That is why again and again in all the scriptures, faith in the Guru, faith in the teacher has been stressed. Why? Because often we don't know what is true for us, correct for us, what we should do and shouldn't do. At that time, where will we go? Because our own mind may be misguiding us. That was what was happening is Arjuna's case. He did not recognize his own motives. He was fooled by his own mind. He was thinking that I have climbed a very high state, I am renouncing and going, I will take sannyasa, I will adopt monastic life. So he thought it was some great thing, but Krishna knew better. What did Arjuna forget when he said, "I will not fight"? Why was he wrong? This we have to understand. Apparently it is a very noble motive. I won't kill anybody, I won't fight, I don't want the kingdom, let them have everything, I will go. It looks like a very noble thing. But what was the problem? What were the chief points which Arjuna was forgetting? He was telling, I will not kill, etc. I will not engage in any violence. So two things Arjuna was forgetting. First, he forgot that no karma means no action in the world can be free from evil effects. There is nothing. Each action has a good and bad side. Each coin has a head and tail. Each seesaw has an ups and downs. So similarly, each act we perform in the world has a good side as well as a bad side. In the Gita it is said, like smoke always accompanies fire, similarly each karma has some bad effects also. You cannot get rid of them altogether. Like even if you do nothing, even if you just breathe, we are killing hundreds of thousands of microbes whom we can't even see. But there is some violence associated even with our very living, even existing. This is one thing he forgot. Violence is associated with everything because each karma has a negative side. But if we don't want the results of that karma, if we don't want the good side of that karma, the bad effects also will not come to us. That is the thing. So suppose for some reason I have to strike at this place, so repair something. So if I strike, I will get the results, but I will also get hurt. Because there has to be a reaction also. So if I want to achieve something by any action, I will get the results of that action if they are good. But I will also get the bad effect because I want the fruits of that action. I cannot say I will strike here, something will go down, but there won't be any reaction. It is simply not possible. When I act, it has to be on both sides. Like if two teams are competing, if someone says, no, let both be winners, is it possible? It's not possible because that win will be relative to what? There can only be a winning if there is a losing somewhere. Otherwise, the win has no significance at all. It doesn't mean anything. So here also, each action has to have a negative side also. But Arjuna had forgot that if he had no selfish motive in the war, if he did it without attachment, those negative effects would not come to him. That is the thing. Secondly, the second thing which he had forgot, which was illogical in his arguments, was he forgot that to fight at this juncture was his dharma or duty. Because he was a Kshatriya. Kshatriya means warrior caste. Like, caste system in India, they are divided on duties. First is the Brahmana caste, supposed to be the highest. Why? Because their duty is to gain knowledge and to transmit knowledge. Then, because for the society to function properly, these four things are necessary. Our saints and sages had such a genius, you see. Now, if you misuse anything, it is not their fault. Slowly, this caste idea was misused in India, that people of higher caste got greater privileges, but that was not the aim. It was to divide the duties. The first duty was the Brahmana. He will gain knowledge and give knowledge. So just on knowledge, society cannot be based. If someone attacks from outside, what will you do? You can't fight them with scriptures and the Vedas. So for that, warriors were also necessary. Those warriors were called the Kshatriya caste. Their duty was to protect the country against those who came, evil persons. Then, simply protection knowledge won't work. Where is the economy? Who will do the business? Who will buy and sell? For that, there was the Vaishya caste. Then other things who will do, cleaning, etc., all these. For that, there was another caste. So it is so well planned. Now, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. If unlawfully someone tries to take your kingdom, it was his duty to protect. So he forgot that if he did not fight, actually he would be incurring sin, not by fighting. Because if you don't do your duty, that is a sin. You had forgotten that as a Kshatriya, it was his Swadharma. Swa means own. It was his own dharma to fight for a just cause. Otherwise, if you don't fight, then the whole society would fall to pieces. If someone had not stopped Hitler, what would have happened? We don't know by this time. Maybe Europe would have ceased to exist, or only God knows. So someone has to do that fighting against evil forces. So he wanted to give up everything and live by begging, etc. But these two things in his arguments are illogical. They don't stand to reason. That's why he was wrong. And Krishna also knew that if Arjuna was not stopped and he was given permission to go away from this battle, what would happen? In Sanskrit they say, Ito nashta, uto bhrashta. He will not gain this as well as that. So he would not gain anything by that so-called begging or monastic life, because his mind was not suited to that. So this side was gone. And another side, his own duty, he did not do. So he was lost on both counts. This was what would happen. Krishna knew. So if I give up my duties and if I take up something higher or any other thing for which I am not fit, not cut out for the duties which I want to accept, then what will happen? I will lose on both counts, because I would have left that which I would have performed well, and I would try to do something for which I was not fit. So Krishna knew that Arjuna could not be allowed to give up his Swadharma. Swa means one's own. Dharma is duty. Now, dharma is duty in this context, but dharma we all know that it also means religion. But here, by Swadharma, we should not understand religion like Hinduism, Christianity, etc. No. Here, what is the dharma? What is the duty? Here, our tendencies, our likings, which depend on our sanskaras or the impressions, they determine our duty. They determine the path which is chalked out for us. So it can be said to be the path of least resistance, what we are inclined and fit for. Both these things should be there. So suppose there is a lawyer's son and he doesn't want to practice law. He wants to be a doctor, for instance. So often we see that parents want that their children should do exactly what they have done. But is it fair? Now, if that lawyer asks his son, forces his son to be a lawyer, although the tendencies in the son are to be a doctor, what will he be forcing him to do? He will be forcing him to act against his dharma. And that poor boy, neither he will be able to be a good lawyer because he is not inclined to that, nor will he be allowed to be a doctor. So what will happen? He is gone on both counts. And this becomes sometimes a serious problem. This actually happens in the world. Parents trying to force their children because depending on their own tendencies. But that shouldn't be done, because the mental aptitude of each person is different. There are different paths. And if we take a path which is not suited to us, our mind will create obstacles. So similarly, for each one of us, there is a path which helps us to progress towards God. And that is the path we should follow. We should not think that path of others is good enough for us. Seeing some monk, if you think we all should become monks, that is not correct. Or if monks think that 99% of people are householders, so let us become householders. That is also not correct. So each person has his own path to God. And that path is what is known as one's own dharma. So if one forsakes one dharma, forsakes one's duty, because it is by doing our duty that we will go towards God. So if we forsake that, we will be completely ruined. So when we are confused sometimes, then our Guru tells us that this is the path for you to follow. If you follow this path, then the obstacles will be much less. This is the thing. So now there may be a question, when this is said, there may be a question that, then what do you mean? Then will there be no changes in the mind? Suppose you like something today, tomorrow we like something else. A person may think that he wants to become a doctor when he's a child, but after 10 years he finds that he wants to become a lawyer. So Swami Vivekananda himself, he says in his life that when he was young, in those days in Calcutta there were horse carriages drawn. The motor vehicles were not so many. So all the carriage drivers, they were very gaily attired, Many colorful dresses they used to wear. So Swami Vivekananda said that when he was a child, he wanted to be a horse carriage driver. So if we say that Swamiji wanted that, so he did a mistake by becoming a monk. He should have become a driver. That would have been his path. So what is the argument then? How do we reconcile with this thing? Then where is your theory of Swadharma? Because that is what he wanted at one point. So the answer is that these ideas evolve in our mind. Our aim of life evolves in our mind slowly. As Swami Vivekananda, when he was a little child, that is true, he wanted to be a horse carriage driver. But then when he became older, what happened? He says that two visions would appear before him when he would go to sleep every day. When he was a young boy, when he turned into a young man from a boy, two visions appeared before him. What were the visions? First vision was, he saw that he had aspired for worldly success, for wealth, power, name, fame, etc. And he saw that he was so confident of his abilities, he was aware of his great power. And his one vision was that he is all out, he is going on for worldly objectives, and he has reached the pinnacle. Absolutely. I mean, he is the king. And he could be. He had such tremendous power. He knew that he could be. And another vision followed, that he had given up everything. He had become a renouncing all wandering monk. So these two visions used to come, these two different ideals of life. But he said that always in the end, even in his dream, he chose the life of the monk. So this is how our ideas evolve. And when he became fully mature, then he realized, and he went to Sri Ramakrishna also to tell that I am renouncing the world. But we know that Sri Ramakrishna told him, no, you please, till I am there, you please be there for me. So here what we see, it is not that Swami Vivekananda one day he thought he would be a horse carriage driver. Next moment, he is telling, no, I want to be a king or I want to be a monk. It did not happen that way. These things come slowly. It takes time. But here what is happening? Here Arjuna, at the blink of an eye, he is telling, I won't fight. So if his renunciation was genuine, how could it come like that all of a sudden? Things don't happen that way. Unless, of course, there is something known as spiritual conversion, etc. But those signs are different. Now, in many Christian saints we read, I think Saint Augustine was one, that there was a sudden conversion. But those conversions, if they are genuine, their signs are there, so that you know it is a definite conversion. That devotion to God, etc., etc. But here, what are the signs? So-called conversion of Arjuna, what is leading him to? We will see later that his eyes are full of tears. He is full of sorrow. So if it was genuine conversion, would this happen? Would he be drowned in sorrow because of receiving the grace of God? So in no way is what Arjuna is saying logical. His appearance does not coincide with what he is prophesizing about himself, that I will become a monk and all that. They don't match because the signs are different. So Shri Krishna knows this very well. What were the signs of Arjuna when he says that he did not fight? It is said in the Gita, he was overpowered by shok and moha. Shok means sorrow and moha is attachment. So genuine spirit of renunciation, does it bring shoka and moha? It will produce the opposite effects. So we know that his so-called renunciation and decision was not at all true. It was not correct for him at all. So this sudden change cannot be there. What was he said when this happened? This is happening where Gita is taking place where? There are two armies standing at a distance, and in between the armies, Krishna and Arjuna are standing. So how did they come there? In between, how did they come there? It was when Arjuna, at the beginning, before the war had begun, he told Shri Krishna, Krishna, take me to the middle. Why? He says, Yavat etan niriksheham yodhu kaman avasthitan. Yodhu kaman means desiring to fight. Avasthitan means they are standing before me. So Krishna, come. I want to see who all are standing before me. Mane, this is a daring approach. He is telling, let me see those fellows. They dared to fight the Pandavas. I will teach them a thing or two. Kairmaya saha yodhavyam asmin rana samudyame. Who all are these fellows who dare to fight us? Let me see. This is one thing, one attitude. And as soon as he sees, the whole scene changes. He completely breaks down. He becomes a wreck. So can this be a genuine renunciation or genuine evolution? Not at all. So what was happening here? There was something wrong. Krishna knew that something is seriously wrong. It is not a case of genuine evolution or something. There is an imbalance. There is an imbalance somewhere. Imbalance in Arjuna's mind. Arjuna is taken aback when he sees all those who are standing before him. He realizes the enormity of the situation. What he is about to do. What? Kill his own people. He knew that hardly anyone would remain alive after the Mahabharata war. And he could not face that situation. That his own near and dear ones, we will go later actually, what he exactly said is a beautiful thing. Matula, Shashura, Pautra, Syala, Sambandhinas, Tatha, all these are standing. So we will go into detail and take up the original some verses of the Gita also to get an idea of what Arjuna was experiencing at that time. So only when we can have a true picture of that, we can have an idea, understand the words, which Sri Krishna taught to Arjuna, which is supposed to be the essence of the Gita according to Swami Vivekananda. So it is 12:30, and according to our routine,